One thing that I have been meaning to bring up that I think is extremely important, and I think perhaps the most important test you could say of being human is how honest someone is with themselves. And I mean that quite literally, just that we have so many dimensions of our life. And I think that that's best embodied through health. Um, I'm trying to get an animation here that's actually interesting. Here we go. So with health, like there's your physical health, obviously. So like gym, diet, sleep, getting outside, all this type of stuff. Then like mental health, whether that's like meditation, prayer, breathing exercises, visualizations. I think some sort of mental habit. I mean, in some sense, you could describe just basic actions like showering and stuff and hygiene and all that as related to mental health, obviously, as well. Like stuff related to maintenance of appearance, um, smell, and stuff. I think that kind of can vary based on culture to the extent, but in the United States, that's like a very big thing naturally. Um, like socially, you have your family, your friends, and then I don't anymore, but I used to work in a like corporate office setting, so then there's like work events and all that type of stuff, which I really disliked. I appreciated my coworkers. I always worked with really cool people, so I don't want to sound like that, but it's just like, hey, like I want to spend my time not at work with different people or by myself. I'm quite introverted, but maybe that'll change. Sometimes with the animations are timed when I say certain things, I almost take it as like a warning sign. So bear that in mind. But just in this slice of health, you can see how there's like 4 or 5 different dimensions, each of which split into like 5 different more main roots. And that if you just take one of them, like physical gym, that by itself can be like a stumbling block that a lot of people like can never get over. And on some level, I have empathy, and then on some level too, I'm like, hey, this is like step one of a much, 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 much longer process of turning one's life around. But I don't mean to harp on that. I mean, it's just it shows how difficult of a challenge leading like a complete, balanced, fulfilled life is, just through the challenge of maintaining health in a world increasingly dead set on like addicting us to negative behaviors, psychologically, physically, and mentally and otherwise. Um, but beyond health, there's just like overall happiness. Like you could be a very healthy person and still be unhappy or discontent inside. So like just being healthy isn't enough. There's also a sense of fulfillment or joy or appreciation for life. Um, there's also the question of like who are you spending your time with in your life. I know for me this has been a very challenging thing where I've spent way too much of my life thinking about people who do not who were like fundamentally negative influences in my life and who I allowed to continue uh, corrupting, draining, and sinking like my energy and ambitions and goals to appease their cynicism and like judgments. And so it is a curious thing why we as humans, or at least me in my case, insist on or I don't anymore. I have finally learned my lesson, so that has been a massive breakthrough for me. That basically certain people, you need to let go of them the way that you let go of like rotten fruit or anything else that's rancid in your fridge. You would never think like, oh, I need to eat this because like it was always like, no, you fucking throw that stuff out. It's nasty. If you eat it, it's gonna make you sick. It's the same way with bad friends. And not the problem, but I think the irony is everyone listening to this is like, well, that's obvious. But the thing is I bet you more than likely you have one of these people in your life and they're still there and you're letting them still be there because they've been there so long. And so, like, we get used to it. And, like, at least in my case, you start identifying with, like, well, they've always been there. Like, they're part of me, they're part of my story. But the truth is I guess not to sound too utilitarian about it, but you could almost think of it like a stock market. Like, you can't think of what has gone on in the past. You have to make the decision based on what you think you know right now. Otherwise, you can just fall into like the classic sunk cost fallacies and stuff where you just keep thinking like, well, I need to win my money back or whatever the case may be, when in reality maybe the situation has changed so much in the last 6 months or 5 years or whatever the time interval is that that investment no longer makes sense and you're holding on to like a dying carcass of an investment. Forgive the imagery. So yeah, and then I guess let's just be truthful. So there's things about being honest with ourselves. Substances, alcohol, in my case, was never really as much the issue, but let me see if I can get the appropriate thing here. Maybe this. Marijuana. Definitely have abused cannabis way too much in my life since I was like 18. So, I mean, that's like a decade. And not the entire time. I mean, obviously, there was like on and off, but way too much. And in my case, I know that if I'm honest with myself, a lot of it had to do with like self medication, of mental health issues, and if we're going to be honest, like trauma that was unresolved. And in a lot of cases, I wasn't even aware of. But then, like in certain instances in college, when you get like blackout drunk or something like that, I mean, I don't know. Everyone else's college experience might have been different. But in my case, getting blackout drunk in the first few years of college wasn't like uncommon. That sounds disgusting saying that, but it's just that was the culture at the place I went at the time. And I'm not saying other people were like that. I was like in a really bad spot mentally and very, very stressed out. And then also, not to the earlier point, like probably hanging around the best influences. So it was kind of more of a byproduct of that. But some of these nights where I get like super blackout drunk, I was having super like fun the whole night. Like, yeah, let's go, let's go. And then at a certain point, I would lose consciousness and then like come to, and I'd be like bawling. And I would just be coming to like super emotional. And it was more of an issue, I guess, like freshman year. And then I like learned my lesson about like, okay, like you got to get a hold of yourself. Like, because you always want to be cool, right? Like, you don't want to lose your cool like that. Like, just me even describing that, it's kind of like, whoa, dude, what happened? But I'm telling you, like, that's the way life can get for a lot of people, whether it's been for you or not, where you just kind of stop caring and you just are like, fuck it, I'm just going to get belligerently, not belligerent, that's more of an expression, but I'm going to get removed from consciousness so that I can like forget, basically. And it's obviously a very sad and dark thing when I'm like putting it into words now. But I think that that's fundamentally what most substance abuse stems from, is wanting to dissociate or detach or like blunt the pain or the memories of whatever is haunting or stressing out the person. I think it can be a past thing. It can be something in their past. It can also be like a present thing, like you're in a job that is currently uh, encouraging this type of behavior or whatever the case may be. So, um, Carl Jung, classically, um, and I guess it comes from Freud maybe, but I like to think of it from more Carl Jung, that like the subconscious, what you repress or suppress, it's going to leak out in different ways. And like it's better to just address it up front. And that's why, okay, this video is getting longer than I expected, but this is me just addressing it up front and showing what it looks like and how kind of ugly and it is. When you over imbibe on a substance, you're like peeling back the layers of who you are as a person and revealing like a very vulnerable image of you, in my perception, like the subconscious, like what you're really thinking or feeling beneath that. And it was very like not even shocking, but just it was embarrassing and frustrating and difficult to grapple with those moments happening in college when like people are trying to have fun and then like you are having fun and having a good time and then like you're drinking too much and you black out and then you start like having an emotional breakdown. These kinds of things should have been like huge red flags to me, obviously, that I needed professional mental health support. But what would happen is that I would start pursuing that at different times and just immediately become very disillusioned by it because whoever I talked to or the experience I'd have just wouldn't go well and I wouldn't feel like I'd get anything out of it. And I'd go and see someone, however many times, like 4 or 6 times, and just feel like, okay, I feel like this is like I'm a child and like this is just like humiliating. I don't even feel like I'm getting anything out of this. And I think that I just didn't find the right person, and I also wasn't at the right spot where I was trying to force it. Like I wasn't really actually wanting to I just wanted my problems to go away. I didn't want to fix my problems. I just wanted them to go away. And the problem or the challenge is with mental health stuff is you actually have to want to fix the problems. It's not enough to just want them to go away. You have to be an engaging participant in it, which makes it, a long-term journey. And so where that leads me to today is like, if I'm just being honest with myself, I'm quite aware that over this last summer, I've been smoking way too much weed. And it's frustrating because like, I know that that's not the person I want to be, and it affects my voice and affects like my memory, all that type of stuff. And it just feels like I'm taking a shortcut. And one of the biggest things I wrote here, or like the last point, I didn't write that much, just a couple. Blind spots, unacceptable behaviors, cheating or cutting corners in low stakes scenarios. And I think that really gets at the heart of the entire thing. Cheating or cutting corners in low stakes scenarios, because those scenarios accumulate over time. And whether it's like getting high for situations where, yeah, it's acceptable to be high from the standpoint I'm going to be able to complete the task and move on. But here's a phrase that I wrote down that I never thought of before, but lying to ourselves or cutting ourselves, quote, moral slack. And I think that's basically what, like in my case with the weed, it is like cutting myself moral slack. Because I know that if the shoe were on the other foot and I was watching someone else's life and they were smoking as much weed as I would think like, yeah, you probably have an issue there. So if I'm going to call a spade in one direction, I have to do the same for myself. At the same time, I'm not pretending to be perfect. I'm not pretending that I have every aspect of my life in perfect balance, or that I have found this golden path or balance in my life. Far from it. I think that for all of us, it's an ongoing process. And it really, I know it's cliche, but it really is more like a journey. And that's where I think that there's a lot of wisdom in like Taoism, that like the Tao is not about, it's about a process rather than an event or a specific principle. It's an ongoing process. And I think when you think about life, that is what life is it's a process. But I've gone on much longer than I was anticipating. The intent of these videos is to be short form, I guess, with this one. Given the depth of the topic, I think it is justified, but I will leave it at that.